I'm Mitchell Tepper, and something I care about deeply is connections, human sexuality, relationships. I actually have a PhD in human sexuality education, and I really love helping people regain that feeling. I was injured on July 27th in 1982 while working as a lifeguard in Lake Mohegan in Fairfield, Connecticut. I was in college, I was having a good time, heading towards a degree in business administration and finance. Less than 2 months prior to my injury, I had surgery for Crohn's disease. So it was a inflammatory bowel disease and ended up with an ileostomy, which is like a collection bag for feces, for poop. I pooped in a bag. So in the 6 to 8 weeks after, I got up to 160 pounds, which was heavier than I ever weighed in my life. When the doctor signed my medical release, he said, don't let this ileostomy, this bag, keep you from doing what you want to do. And I'm like, I want my job back as a lifeguard. And so he signed my release. And unfortunately, on one of my first weekends back at the lake, it was near the end of the day. I was going out just to fix a buoy. There was a line separating the deeper end. I ran in, I dove over that line, head planted in the mud. I guess I wasn't used to my new body, the 160 pounds and the bag. And I just heard a psst, and just kind of floated to the top. And the rescue team was there, and they're saying, can you feel this? Can you feel that? I'm like, my hand hurts. I thought I broke my hand. When I figured it out, I had the kind of same experience when I woke up after surgery for my Crohn's disease. I had some complications. They opened me up again, and I woke up and I had this bag on me, and I looked at it and I just started crying. And then, but once that was done crying, that was it. It was like moving forward. I was a swimmer, a diver. I liked gymnastics. I did karate before I broke my neck. And I actually had a physical therapist. He was a champion in, believe it might have been some style of kung fu. But, I just still remember, practicing on the mat when we were balancing, he would show me different moves, maintain my balance while doing that. So taking, kind of the spirit of sport to rehab was very helpful. I think it took a couple of years before life was back to normal for me, the new normal. Having my car with my hand controls and the right wheelchairs, finishing school, developing a whole new network of friends, many through the National Spinal Cord Injury Association, which is now United Spinal. My father had passed away before I broke my neck, so, the big support system was my mother, Then I graduated summa cum laude, head of my class and 3.98 average, and I had a difficult time getting a job. I got a job in a bank only because my mother worked there, and they had rejected me. I really wasn't willing to initially say I was being discriminated against by all these other companies where I saw people with lesser experience and lesser grades get hired before me. So that was a challenge. But one of the most surprising accomplishments since my injury was fathering a child of my own at home. Still, when I was in intensive care, I think it was one of the first things I asked when I could talk, when I asked about my abilities to have a child. And the doctor at the time told me chances were less than 10%. I didn't know what my future would be like, with finding a new partner. I had a date scheduled for the night I broke my neck, and that didn't happen. So for me, rehabilitation partly was sexual rehabilitation. I was just trying to figure out what worked for me. I read a lot, and so I figured things out on my own and shared that with other people. I moved from banking I had a short stint doing durable medical equipment sales, and then went back for my master's in public health, where I did a national survey of sex education and counseling in spinal cord injury rehab programs. And out of, hundreds of people across the country that responded, less than half the people got any type of sexual education when they were in rehab. Only half of those people said it met their needs. It was through other people in United Spinal who taught me about using a vibrator to elicit ejaculation. And then by that time in my life, I was already doing my PhD research, and one of my colleagues told me how to do an at-home insemination to conceive my son, who is now 23 years old. As a sexuality educator and a counselor, I often get the question of, well, who's going to find me attractive? Who am I going to end up with? I'm in a chair. And so we have to kind of think about how we thought about sexuality, how we thought about other people. If we don't have a sense of humor, it's good to develop one. People like someone with a sense of humor. I mean, you can be a complete high-level quad using a sip and puff, but if you're confident in your abilities and know that you have value as a person, there's somebody out there who's going to connect with that. And the best proof of that is looking at people like me. I have a great quality life. I've been married, for 33 going on 34 years. And other people with injuries who are in long-term relationships, who are in marriages, who have families, because there's plenty of us out there. Now I am focusing on aging well. I'm going on 58 years old. I'm exploring where I could go sailing more in Georgia in the lakes, figuring out the best way to retrofit one of my chairs so I could be independent moving on the sand, and developing a raised garden where I could spend a little bit more time growing stuff because I like eating what I grow. I have always been pretty smart as far as for managing my shoulders. And so I didn't take the quad rugby on forever. I used to do wheelchair racing, but I also used power mobility. I have a power wheelchair, and I also have assisted rims for my manual chair. So I wasn't embarrassed or afraid to use those way, way early on. I use my abilities to stay fit. I exercise regularly. I do yoga. I swim, and I do push, my chair without power assistance some days too. But you really need to balance what you do so you could stay healthy for as long as possible, because I want to stay independent in my home. My advice for a newly injured person is to be open to learning from other people with spinal cord injuries with more experience, and to focus on the future. Know that it's only going to get better over time, and resist the urge to constantly compare your life to what life was like before injury. So if I measured the value of my life by how I walked today versus how I walked 37, 38 years ago, I wouldn't put much value in it, right? So there will be things that you will find to replace the things you love to do and that you lost. It's sad, so cry if you need to cry. Grieve in any way you need to grieve. But don't spend too much time there. Focus on what you can do to experience pleasure in your life again, from different activities.